We're created to praise. We're created to worship. We're created to create. There's something about counting your blessings that's very real.
You know your heart is right. You want to provide for the family. You want to honor God. You want to use your talents and your skills. But somehow, some way, this sneaky thing gets in the way, and that is I've got to pursue success.
If you think about it, if Christ is in you, we are a new creation. The old is gone, the new is here.
That's right.
And I was stuck in between head knowledge and action. The question was, tell me about your relationship with Jesus. What is that like?
Stories stir the soul.
Stories reveal.
And stories heal.
In this podcast, we will give you an inside look at someone who's had a life-changing breakthrough.
Real people, real stories with real breakthroughs. As a health and wellness expert and coach, and Todd as a men's mentor,
we've seen firsthand what God can do when it comes to a breakthrough. So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough.
Hello, and welcome to Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm your host, Wendy Pett.
Hey, howdy, hey, hi.
Howdy, hey.
I'm Todd Isberner.
Well, hey, Todd Isberner.
Yes.
Have you told everybody yet to go to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com?
I've told everybody.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody all the time that's tired of me hearing it. But
Well,
not really. Actually, we've got to remind people again, we've got a freebie for you that
Yes.
really, you're going to really like this.
Yes, you need to go to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com and sign up for the Audible and download. It's 6 powerful real-life stories of mind-blowing breakthroughs.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
Wait,
Like,
signing up just simply means give us your email.
yeah, so we
Send
can,
it to you.
yeah, we'll send it to you. And I'm serious, it's really well done. And it's something you can either listen to while you're out on a walk or working out or on your drive home,
You want to
or if you want to read it. It's so inspiring.
You want to hear about miracles? That's where you go.
That's
so
where you go.
Please, we're begging you.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Stop that favor.
Do it. All right. Well, we're so excited to be with you today because we have a great guest.
We always have
do.
great
Always.
guests.
Yes.
So let me ask you, because it's sort of at the heart of what our guest is going to talk about is the whole idea of success. So I want to ask you, so how would you define success?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of words that come to mind,
Yeah.
but
Give me a couple.
like position.
Okay. Position like in your job.
Yeah. Your status, credibility.
Yeah. I would say your influence.
Yeah.
Oftentimes is related to your success. Your notoriety. Oh, there goes so-and-so. What a success. And mostly people identify it with financial.
Cha-ching.
Yeah,
Cha-ching.
cha-ching. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And here's the challenge. That pursuit of that success oftentimes fools us into thinking that we're living our best life, when in reality, we're starting to get blinded in this pursuit of success.
Yeah, which can be detrimental to your health, your relationships, all kinds of things.
Throws our priorities in complete opposite direction, even though we're thinking, I'm just doing this to take care of my family or whatever it
Well,
may be.
and not that you shouldn't strive to meet goals and become successful, but what's your definition of success? I think that's it, right?
So our guest, Josh Dittrich, is a true success, and he's dug down the layers of those other things to find meaning in Jesus Christ, and really now living out his passion and his calling. He's calling himself a stewardpreneur. You'll have to tune in and hear a little bit more about that, but he loves working with others to try to help them leverage their God-given talents and their passions and their resources in order to serve and create lasting impact in people and in their businesses and in their communities. He is a delight. He is an inspiration. He's a massive entrepreneur who's just completely sold out to Jesus, and he wants you to be there too.
Yeah, so enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to Your Biggest Breakthrough, Josh Dittrich. It's a pleasure to meet you. I know Todd already knows you, but it's so fun to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, and if you get a chance to, do the YouTube version, you'll see that smile that just won't quit. That'll be on his face the entire time that we're talking. And why is that big smile always on your face?
Hey, man, when the Lord's doing something, why not? I mean, at the end of the day,
that's it.
We're created to praise. We're created to worship. We're created to create. So there's something about counting your blessings that's very real.
That's right. That's right.
So good. So, Josh, you've got really an impactful story, and then it's so relatable to so many of us. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. We get in places where we end up losing hold of the vision and the calling that God has put on our lives. So you've got a lot of breakthroughs in your life. In fact, I was showing Wendy on your website too, I sort of go
He's the man of
the
breakthrough.
chronological order of different events in your life from 2002. It's like, oh my gosh, that reads like a book. Like that's a movie waiting to be made, a documentary. But let's go back to the beginning. Just talk a little bit about your home life growing up, and where were you at in terms of your faith as a young child, and how did it progress?
Yeah, it's interesting because I look back a lot, and it's so great to reflect on our stories and how they've helped shape us and turn us into who we are. And my dynamic of faith was interesting. My parents, Catholic on both sides, broke away from the Catholic Church around fourth grade when I was in fourth grade. And it was because they started attending Bible study, and there was a program very similar to Awana's called King's Kids that we started attending and learning scripture at a young age. And that was one of those things that I still look back and I'm like, so many scriptures were from that foundation that I would not have had otherwise. And then I stayed actually in the Catholic school until 10th grade. And so part of that journey was, my parents thinking that the education was going to be better. In fact, I found that majority of the kids in that school that I grew up with were more into the partying than the public school. And so one of the first things I did was a good friend of mine, this pastor's kid, moved away to the metro. And so my junior year was a fresh, clean slate. And so I made a change to the public school. And that was sort of the beginning, though, at the same time, as memorable as that was part of the season of life where I was like, I'm 16, new friends, and let's discover things that maybe I shouldn't be into. And but if I look back, I had a really strong foundation of faith, and I was involved in praise and worship, drumming as a drummer, probably as early as the 7th and 8th grade. So it's been around a long time.
So it's interesting to hear you say too that your parents helped you memorize scripture, and that was part of your growing up experience. I was thinking, Wendy, how you used to put on the bulletin board or on the
whiteboard, scripture verses for my son. Yeah.
So sometimes we think, they're not paying any attention, but it's amazing. Okay, God can take that, bring it down home. So you had a relatively good foundation in your family and your faith. When you turn 16, like most 16-year-olds,
like most of us,
I want to go experiment, and maybe I shouldn't do that, but what's the big deal? So where did that lead to? How did you progress from 16 to, because you've got vibrant faith now, and I know there was a lot of bumps in the road along the way, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say at that season, identity is a thing you wrestle with and figuring out sort of what that means and the makeup. And for a long time, wanting to fit in and having now a new group of friends that quickly I clung to that, clung to me. I was okay and willing and able to fit in and hope to. And so that just led to the traditional partying and the drinking, and being involved with girls. And so that progressed into
Wait a minute, it's so funny. It's so funny.
18.
Sounds like Todd's story. This is what it sounds like.
But it sounds so funny too, because it's just led to the traditional things.
The traditional things. The worldly traditional.
Isn't that true? So parents, hang on for the ride. You can raise those kids right, but sometimes it's just out of your control. But your prayers won't go unanswered. So
right. The foundation is solid.
That's it. Yeah, raise your child in the way that they should go, so when they get old, you won't part from it. And so for me, it was probably kind of walking that way. 16 into 18, packed my bags, moved from Iowa to Minnesota. Not even 2 months after high school finished in my 18th birthday, I was pursuing a career in video broadcasting. And what's interesting is I never used it, never did anything with it until 20 years later when I launched my podcast. So
wow,
God used that as well.
Nothing's wasted, right?
Yeah, wow.
Nothing's wasted. Yeah, but I feel like, from 16-ish, it was always a head knowledge. And I would say that the knowledge was, I know Jesus is Lord, but is he Lord over my life? That's the difference between thought and action, right? Faith without deeds is dead. Was I producing fruit? I would say probably not. But what's interesting that God really allowed my wife, the story was like carbon copy to her and I. And at the right time, we sort of met and, had never really walked away from faith, but had not ever really grew in my faith. And so we were very lukewarm, which, as we know, can be more dangerous than hot or cold. Well, than cold. But it was the right timing. And her story is very similar. And we came together and said, let's refigure this thing out. And so at the age of about 24, 25, I was, back into all in the sense of this was going to be a priority in our lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Was there something that led up to that specifically? I mean, it seems like there's a growing awareness, but was there anything in particular that kind of pushed you over that line?
I think there's always the seasons you go through and the seasons of various relationships, jobs, friendships. And I feel like it was a really big culmination of, I had roommates for a long time, and I had a roommate that was a best friend that I felt like backstabbed me. And so I packed my bags. I moved out for the first time after a number of years being with roommates. I went and got my own apartment. And I kid you not, it wasn't even 3 or 4 months later that I met my future soon-to-be wife. But the seasons had already started to shift because I was already deciding that, what, I've created a foundation. I've started to make some money, and I wanted to establish my own sort of reliance on being self-sufficient, let's call it. And at that moment was when a lot of this started to unravel. That, for me, I think, hey, what do I want? I do want to get married, and it was never intentional to move out because of that. It just happened to be the circumstances because my wife had also just moved out onto her own. And so when we met,
kind of on the same path.
We were like literally on the same path. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. God knew.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I love the way that God can orchestrate circumstances because he already recognized what you knew in your head about him. And he recognized your efforts to want to try and follow him. And the same thing for your wife. So then he brings the two of you like-minded people together. And now it's almost like
he knew your heart was ready.
Yeah, it's like you're rekindling the flame together, which I think is awesome. So from that point on, everything was hunky-dory, right? I mean, life was great and huge success spiritually and business-wise, right? Just fantastic.
Like that, and here we are.
No, I don't think so. What happened?
Right?
Take us a little further down the journey.
Not without challenge. I think one thing that we quickly realized was re-engaging back into a church home and really starting to understand that as the body, we need to be a part of the body.
Yes.
And just being a part of worship again was really just a brand new beginning. We were really quick to meet, and 10 months later we were engaged. 10 months later we were married. 10 months later we had our first kid. And
how long have you been married now?
So we just hit 15 years.
15. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Would have been in April.
Congratulations. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think through that progression, though, we had still lived in ways that we were okay with, and in some ways, some drinking, in some ways, premarital sex. And one thing that happened is when we knew that we were absolutely all in for each other, was interesting because in my mind, this was a step I was never going to take and buy a house before we were married, but we intentionally did, given the timing of the market. But we made a covenant, truly a covenant to God. And we moved into the house in the fall of 2008, and we abstained, and it was incredible because marriage night was like, there had never been anything ever before. And so
beautiful.
I just remember the
he honored
whole,
that.
He did. And it was just like, I didn't even know that was possible. Right.
Yeah. Even in spite of what happened before. You're right.
Amen.
So
Amen.
he
Right.
restores and he makes all things new, and he proved it right there because of you guys honoring him in such a way. It's beautiful.
But I think there are so many who are in that place of being sort of okay about all of that because they're okay with God, right? It's like, well, I have faith and I'm going to church and we're plugged in and we're pretty good people and we talk to God. But the other stuff just sort of gets covered over with this deceptive mindset that it's all okay because I'm okay with God.
I think there's an abuse of grace, quite frankly, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
there
we
is.
take
Yep.
advantage of it. But I
Yeah.
think there's so many people that are in that place. So what I'm wondering is, what was it about you and your wife that that God must have seen that he could grab hold of to get you into a place to make that covenant that is so rare?
Yeah, I don't know it, but our heart posture was aligned in the sense that we had recognized we were living our own way, right? We had recognized, both of us were. We recognized that we wanted to honor him in how he originally designed marriage in male and female, but then also sort of just recreate something we thought would be, or others would think was impossible. Almost
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
this,
Yeah.
we're gonna do this. And part of it was almost because we were moving in together. And I'm trying to think back. I'm almost was clear to others that we were abstaining. And
Good.
if you think I'm willing to wear my heart on my sleeve and be real, I was probably still similar to that then. And so I would give everyone, my wife would say, you don't need to share everything all the time with everybody.
Right.
And so,
But think of
I
how
would
it
say
piqued
that.
people's interest knowing
Mm.
that you guys bought a house together, but yet you are abstaining, right? So just
So
people's kind of ears perked up and wanting to know why, and you probably had a better opportunity to talk about the Lord in that way, right?
I would say I probably did. I don't recall how much it was leveraged. I would say that my faith at the time was not as strong, not as bold, but very clearly internally, her and I were aligned. And so, especially on the female side, that this is information that many cases others prefer just not
Sure,
shared.
sure,
So I
sure.
would say somewhere in between there.
Yeah, I
Hard to
got
really
you.
say, but yeah.
That's good to hear. I was picturing you like with a sandwich board walking downtown Minneapolis saying, "We're abstaining, we're together."
Yeah.
Written all
Yeah.
over it. Yeah, that's good.
That's
So,
right.
Josh, I was sharing with Wendy a little bit of your story. By the way, you had this incredible event where you invited all these men together. You've got a real passion for helping men find their place and live godly lives as.
Know their identity in Christ.
But you had all these guys. I don't know how many guys. You must have had over 100 guys in your backyard who were just there to fellowship and network,
Eat.
interconnect, and eat incredible food. But you shared a little bit of your story there, and I think a lot of people resonate with this story that once things get going, now you and your wife are married, you're planning on having children, you've got your home, and you've got your job, and then you've got other jobs, and then you've got, I've read through your bio, man, you did all these businesses, like you're a true entrepreneur, you're buying, selling, you're creating great things. But that takes its toll. So talk to us about what happened in your life once you were really off to the races and then where the breakthrough came.
Yeah, I would say, the first year or two of the honeymoon marriage, was sort of like, as I mentioned, the 10 months came pretty quickly before we were pregnant. And so, we were in that season between newlyweds to new baby coming. I had just taken a job where I left Best Buy corporate, where I was, showing up and riding in the backseat of a van pool to and from, pretty much dialed in 40 hours a week, to making this first leap of faith of joining a small entrepreneurial organization 100 miles away from my house. And so I would drive down on a Monday, spend the night in South Minnesota, in Rochester, and then come back Tuesday night, drive down Wednesday, spend the night, come back Thursday night. In the midst of my wife, probably 7 months pregnant. So I started May in 2010, and our first child was born in September. And so she was driving from St. Michael to Minneapolis, and I was driving way down there. And I started beginning to uncover some of the first stages of just my own selfishness that I wasn't aware of. And it was, this is a major opportunity. This is so great. I have to do this. And it was like the beginning of blinders. And here she is driving pregnant to and from Minneapolis, full day of work, also doing her master's. But I was just doing me. And so the very beginning seasons of that were just the arguing of the lack of seeing each other and not being around, led me to realize that I was still a very selfish being in that, but I didn't realize that, I would say. I was very much aware, though, that we had conflict. Looking back, I'm aware of why, but that's where things started to become. And then my first child was born, and I'm literally, day one, back in the saddle, probably just, in the delivering room, or the day after, the next day, with my laptop, and I'm working and I'm grinding, because I'm like, this
Were you
opportunity
kind of
was so unique.
addicted to the grind, or were you just seeing this vision of what would be there, and as a provider, you were kind of wanting to take it to that next level? I mean, I'm just kind of curious the drive.
Yeah, you're right on the latter. I think it's hard to sometimes recognize why until we ask ourselves a few of those questions. And I think I felt like someone had trusted me and bet on me and gave me this unique opportunity, and I didn't want to waste it. So I wouldn't use this then, but I felt I was responsible for stewarding, not only the gifts and talents I had, but the unique opportunity I had. And so it was like, I'm going to do this. Why not? And I don't think I would ever say that I would love to work, but the old adage of if it doesn't feel like work, you'll never work a day in your life. Like, that's where I was in.
Sure.
I was in the creation zone. Like,
Yeah.
it was flowing, right? So that's what drove me, though.
But I wonder how many people listening, Josh, that have been really just so immersed in their job, because I've been there, you've been there, Todd, that it almost becomes out of godly order, right? Like, instead of your family being first, it was kind of the job first. And while your heart was good behind it because you wanted to provide, that was the thing that was kind of idolatry in a way, right?
100%. And actually now, if I were to just inverse a pyramid, I would call it the priority awareness. So as I meet with men, I'm listening to their heart and how they talk about the things they love and their priorities, because I'm able to recognize often some of the same patterns, behaviors, and others that I had. So to your point, understanding first, yes, head knowledge, God, send His Son Jesus. Okay, I got that box checked. I'm good. And then, husbands, love your wife like Christ loved the church. I was like, okay, well, I'm providing. That's how I'm going to love. And that was the lie I believed. And the thing is, if I were to look back, it wasn't wrong in the sense that I did want to provide.
Right.
But it became far more important than anything else, right? And then the child came, and then, so if I were to just go through the list, typically work might be 2 or 3, layers below, and it was certainly on the top. And so I was inverse balance out of the start.
I think it happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, it has a real funny disguise to it, because your heart is right. You want to provide for the family. You want to honor God. You want to use your talents and your skills. But somehow, some way, this sneaky thing gets in the way, and that is, I've got to pursue success. And success is defined in all kinds of different ways. In most cases, it's defined by what's my status at work and how much money I'm making. So but I have to do that in order to take care of my family, right? But like you said, it gets inverted. So there you are, you're grinding it out big time. You're achieving success. The money is starting to come in. You must feel pretty good about all of that. So what happened that things got so out of balance? I recall you saying you weren't feeling well, you got overweight, all these things started to compound.
Yeah. How did it affect your health? Yeah.
Pursuing success.
Yeah, I think if you were to just unpack the layers, which are often missed, because it's usually you were this, and then all of a sudden people see this, they're not really aware of the slow fade. And the slow fade is a great Casting Crown song. The slow fade is an amazing analogy of what I call the 1 in 60 principle. So for every 60 miles you go, you're 1 degree off course. You're 1 mile off course.
Yeah.
So that would mean from Washington DC to San Francisco, the opposite. If we were to go San Francisco to DC and we're 1 degree off, we're going to end in Baltimore, which is 43 miles off course. And so it's the little things along the way. And I still, so we were all in the sense of we were going to church, we were giving, we were serving, we were in small groups. We were in fact even leading small groups. But on the flip side, the pursuit of success or providing, the ante continued to be upped. It was, look at the compensation you can make if you do this or we achieve these numbers. It was, look at the responsibility now to build a team and manage a team. And these things led to, I need to go to trade shows. I need to learn more about the industry. I need to be connected to the industry. So then I started traveling more. And then as I started traveling, that can really promote unhealthy lifestyle of eating and certainly making it difficult to work out, especially then in some of the access to technology, just weight, fitness centers were in some ways few and far between and more on the higher end. So there's just a lot of reasons. And I would say health deteriorated, gained weight. And
how much weight did you gain?
So at the peak, I was probably, I think the number's around 40 pounds. And I'm roughly, I'm 35 pounds lower than my highest. So
yeah,
it had to come back. But it took a lot to even get to the weight as the thing. Like the weight came actually as like one of the second to last things, because that was always a time battle, right?
Sure.
And so if time is the issue, the easiest things that go are the ones that take up time, like working out. But even just the decision to eat right? So I would say when you're traveling, I would find ways to travel more. I would find ways to say, I have a crazy life at home. At this point, maybe 2 or 3 little kids, and if it was a necessity would be, it probably looks like a trip I should go on. And it would be half of a vacation. It would be an excuse to get away.
And the wedge that could cause between you and your spouse, right?
Unaware of it, right?
Yeah.
But thinking like, I'm doing it because, go back to those first reasons.
Yeah.
And so the slow fade began by telling myself these and believing these lies.
Yeah.
And when you're out and about, it's easy to go to bars if you still are one that drinks. It's easy to perhaps go to strip clubs if you're with a group of men that are going. And, you have lots of ways to tell yourself you can look but not touch. Right. And so these lies that the enemy, but also the culture has continued to instill.
The temptation is much greater. Yeah.
Right.
So you're starting to become unaware of being immersed into worldly thought patterns, worldly behaviors. Even though you've got the foundation of faith, the other stuff is overriding it. And I love what you say, because it's so truth about, little by little we get there. It's not like all at once I make a decision, I'm just going to go off the deep end for a little while. It's these subtle little changes. So you had enough of those, obviously, where you must have hit a breaking point, because something changed inside of you, because who you are today and what you do today looks completely different than what it did prior to this breakthrough. So tell us what happened.
Yeah. And I think it's important to make that distinction too, because if you think about it, if Christ is in you, we are a new creation. The old is gone, the new is here. And,
that's right.
And I was stuck in between head knowledge and action, and very questionable action. And so you're right. I think it started with, very simply, that travel and being away led to, being outlaid or trailing around with those that were at various events, and, led to really 2 instances of infidelity. And I always clarify infidelity, because that's really just a word that would describe being unfaithful and not putting your wife or your spouse as exclusively the person that you would ever touch. And so I broke that trust, and for the first time it was like, it was just making out, and I could shove that down. The second time was a little more serious, but again, never
Start
as
to
serious as one
justify.
would start to justify. And then things like it happens in Vegas, what happens there stays there, right? You tell yourself these things. So for 3 years, I kept internalizing and kept this. And it got to a point where, whatever show, whatever conversation could come about, it was almost like if there was I'm trying to think of NCIS, anything that would point to something that would have something related. It's not like we were watching nasty shows, but these shows would relate to some sort of thing that would happen. And I would be like, I don't want to engage in conversation about the show related to that item because that might
Because it might
point
bring
back
up your
to me
stuff.
somehow.
Mm.
Yes. And I would have to find a way to, not look her in the eye.
Wow, and that's a
And
tough
that
place
got
to be,
so
not being
bad.
able to put
Mm,
your head on the pillow and sleep at night was probably pretty hard, right?
100%,
Right.
and anxiety kicks in and those
Mhm.
types of things. So 3 years of that, it was no wonder why, I was starting to experience anxiety that led to anger outbursts, and I struggled with anger. I would say I would lose my temper because I followed a father that didn't have really good abilities to manage his emotions. But that was one of those things where it got to a point where I was afraid of what might happen. And so this far down the line, I made the very first step, and that was simply doing a Google search and picking up the phone and calling a Christian counselor.
Wow,
And I
that
interviewed
takes a
him and was
lot
like,
of courage.
amen, amen,
You know,
right? And I
it
think
almost seems
sometimes the first step
It is.
seems like
Yeah, proud of
in
you.
those 3 years, your life was going from a simmer to a boil. You know what I mean? You can watch the water start to heat up, and you hit that boiling point where somehow, somewhere, you said to yourself, "Enough is enough.
I
I've
need
got to
help.
do something different." And but I commend you because, especially as a guy, it's so tough for us to ask for help. We'd like to just rather sort it out on our own.
Or
I
just dismiss it.
I
Like it
got
didn't
this
happen.
thing. I'll
Mhm.
get it figured out. I'm a guy. I know how to solve problems. But the fact that you knew you were at a point you needed help is just, to me, that's a call out to any guy or any woman who thinks you got this. Look, if you're in over your head, the best thing you can do is naturally
Bring it to the light.
you ask God for help, but then God's going to use people to bring those answers and those solutions for you. So, all right, so there you are. You've contacted this Christian counselor. What happened next?
So I began to, prepare for the first session and like, okay, I'm going to do this and no big deal. The first question is the one that just really started the real action, right? So picking up the phone, showing up, still hard things, but the question was, tell me about your relationship with Jesus. What is that like? And, and I'm like, well, I'm involved in church. I lead a small group. I give, I serve. It's
Well,
like,
you're
no, no,
checking
no.
boxes like
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah,
Yeah,
bro.
man. Right?
Yeah.
I can check
Yeah.
boxes all day. No, he's like,
Yeah.
what's your relationship like? So
Uh,
I've never heard box as, part of relationship. And I'm talking about prayer and I'm talking about reading his word. And I had reasons for those things not being what they are or what they should be. And I remember the number one excuse for not reading the word was just simply, I'm not a reader. And with a person who's dealt with ADHD until more recently understanding that the diagnosis has impacted my ability to stay focused in reading, and a whole nother game change, whole nother topic. But understanding that first, that reading was just, no, didn't want to do it. And I couldn't identify with it. But something about James, he recommended I started with James. And, just every once in a
That's-
while, I get
That's
to
okay, Josh. That's good.
Ah.
That's the Holy Spirit right there, man.
right?
Yeah.
I was
Chris, he gave
convicted by,
Yeah.
being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And it was a practice, And then I would read the first chapter every day, and I would reread it the next day, and I would read it the next day, and I would take different notes each day. I did this for 2 weeks, and I'm like, this looks like a whole bunch of notes from a whole bunch of different things. It's just the Holy Spirit giving me new revelation.
New downloads. Yeah.
So that was the beginning of that massive climb.
Hmm. That is so
Beautiful.
beautiful how God uses his word. He does say when it goes out, it's
Yeah.
not going to return to me void. And there you are.
Right.
And of course, you're a counselor. I'm amazed. He doesn't give you the Gospel of John, which is where a lot of people like to start. He gives you James, which is just tough as nails.
He knew. Yeah, this guy needs James.
This guy needs some behavioral modification.
That was rough. It
But
worked,
you know,
though, you know?
I have to ask, because as Todd's wife, and I'm thinking about your wife at this moment, did she know all this was going on when you picked up the phone to call the counselor, or when did all this come into play that she was aware? And I mean, I'm just thinking about her right now as well. She probably had to get some counseling.
Yeah, I think the original, and this is very powerful, I think, for any man to not give up hope, because let's be honest, it always takes two. And my excuses are mine, are mine to own. My words are mine to own. But when I would continue with whatever it is, I was doing, I would always be really good at pointing out her problems too. And her problems did impact me. But I was unwilling to move the log. And so I just started with that. I just started with me.
It's good.
But here's the reality. God uses all things for good, because he sure did. And that journey of counseling continued to refine a whole lot of me that needed refining. But it wasn't until, and I was a part of a community of men that I'm now a coach of and bring together groups of 12 or 15 peer groups. I was a part of one that I've been looking for so long. And as I was learning and growing and gone through that process of sanctification and refinement, I saw other men that were motivating me to make change. And it was my turn to bring my problem. And you could bring a personal, a professional, spiritual problem to the table, to get counsel from other brothers. And it was my turn, and it was like, and I'd done two before. So this is the third year, you get one a year. And I remember being in church, and the Lord's like, it's time. And I was like, I'm not doing this one, And so I came to senses that I needed to start with my counselor and talk to him about it. And then I called the leader and talked with him about it. And he's like, guess what? There's a few guys going to be missing, but let's wait till next month. So I got a buffer there. I got a free month to prepare.
To not sleep at night.
Oh, man. But it was exactly what I needed, because men there were not there to condemn me and nail me to the cross. They were there to love on me, but also challenge me, right?
Yeah.
Guys, this is just, you can't make this stuff up.
That's so good.
So, by the way, for the record, I think vulnerability is strength. And so,
amen.
What you experience here is me just being wrecked by my own sin.
I love it, Josh. Makes me want to cry, because I think more men need to understand that is strength, being vulnerable and humble and sharing truth and being authentic.
And I think that's what you've experienced with the guys you've surrounded yourself with, and the guys who look to you and are modeling after you. And that is so needful in today's society, with men not even knowing who am I and what am I about? What am I supposed to be? Because I'm hearing culture tell me I ought to be this, and that doesn't feel right. I'm not wired that way. So I commend you, because you're living it out the way God intended. You're living out your manhood, your manliness.
Yeah. And I commend you and your wife, because you both worked on it, and you may still be working on it. I don't know, but you worked on it. And that's to be commended, because it's way too easy to just bail, right?
It is.
So that's to be commended, and that takes courage. So well done. Yeah.
So you call yourself a stewardpreneur. Did you coin that term?
Yeah, I would say technically I would like to think I created it, but I would say that I discovered it, because I first had to understand that some of these words like steward and entrepreneur already existed. I just discovered for myself that this season of life, through radical transformation, being so driven by work and my career, got me to my knees. And by the way, 2 months later, I finally did share with my wife, which led to, for the first time, her willingness to start counseling, to discover that there's a whole lot inside her own brain that she needed to work on, that she wanted to work on.
The
Beautiful.
freedom for both of you.
Oh, yeah.
It was so unreal. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I had began to unpack this story, and it was my turn to share this, an opportunity to get in front of men and speak. And I came back from an amazing time with my wife and a Brandon Lake concert, ripped, roaring, ready to go to take this story and put it in the form of a talk. And I prepared for 3 weeks. And as I was preparing, the Lord was very clear that this is not the end all be all of your story. This is just the beginning, which led to me sharing the story that while I was, appeared to be successful in the path of selling my businesses for many millions, the path to getting there was an unsuccess due to the circumstances I just unpacked. So it led me to launch the podcast, Successfully Unsuccessful. And so as the reality would have it, that I started to realize that I was stewarding this knowledge and information that other men could latch onto, that I needed to share. And as I began wondering and spending money about getting this podcast launched, I was like, well, I should probably hold back. So I hired consultants and I was writing a lot of checks. I'm like, I should probably figure out how to monetize this. So that led to the interest and opportunity to become a coach. And that led to becoming a coach and starting to meet with men to realize, holy cow, these men, there's so much I just feel like I could pour into them, not just my story, but like my professional abilities, my skills, my knowledge, what I've done, the experiences I have. And it hit me a ton of bricks that I wasn't asked to choose between ministry and business anymore, that I was asked to steward them. And so Stewardpreneur came this word of, I'm going to build and create, but I'm also a steward. It's all God's. So we're working on the trademark, but we're getting there. It's almost there.
I love it. I love it, Josh.
It's a go-getter, man.
Seriously. And there is just a need for men to have real men in their lives as mentors, or just someone they can go to keep them accountable, whatever, just to pour into them. And so I love that you do that as well. And I know Todd does too. And I commend you.
Yeah, they're so.
As a mom of a son, I think it's a needed, wonderful path.
You're doing a great work, man. You really are. And men really need this kind of support, this kind of accountability, this kind of insight, this kind of challenge. Surround yourself with the right group of men. So if guys want to get in touch with you and kind of check out your coaching program and other resources, where's the best place to send them?
Yeah, I've been working through what this looks like, but very simply my name, first name, last name, joshdittrich.com. And it's like, okay, point things to you. It's like, well, no, I've been trying to figure out, it's only because my name is on my ID. So if when I die, they know how to identify the body, but I want the credit to point back to Jesus. So I'm trying to find a way to have blinking lights be the first thing you see that says Jesus lives here or something like that. So
I love that. That's good. Well, you're already, you've got the cool wardrobe on, and that's by your friends from Exclaim Jesus. And you're shouting it loud and proud. And I think it's awesome.
What we love so much about your story too, Josh, is that it is so very relatable to so many of us who have either been in that place or are in that
or know somebody.
Yeah,
right.
Know somebody and want to get out of that place.
Yeah.
And your story has great impact, and your passion, your desire to see men break free so that they can be all that God's called them to be. I know He will bless that because your desire is to honor Him. So glad to call you a brother, bro, and grateful for what God is doing in your life.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing from your heart. We really, truly appreciate you.
Anytime, and when it's time for part 2, let me know.
Oh yeah.
All right. God bless you.
He ain't done.
No, he's not. No, he's not. All right. God bless you both. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh.
Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, we love spending time with you right here on Your Biggest Breakthrough podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. But until then, just head on over to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com, where you'll find some free resources and information and a place where you can comment, and we would love to dialogue with you there. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.